Seasoned mom with flair, crafter who cares, writer of tales with dolls in her lair, with stitches so fine, a wit so divine, her humor is twisted as grape on the vine, attracting the strange, confessions arranged, her life is a mix that's delightfully deranged. Rachel makes it weird.
Hello, and welcome to the third episode of my podcast, Rachel Makes It Weird. I'm talking to you from my room, hoping that no one in my family comes in here asking for help with their homework or if I'll take them to Chuck E. Cheese. I promised them that we'd go this week, but I'm hoping they'll forget about it because the thought of being in a confined space with a lot of other people's children who are running around hopped up on soda gives me hives. Today I want to talk about imposter syndrome. According to the Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary, imposter syndrome is a psychological condition that is characterized by persistent doubt concerning one's abilities or accomplishments accompanied by the fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite evidence of one's ongoing success. All this week I have been battling imposter syndrome. It's been fun, guys. There is nothing more pleasant than being assailed by fears and self-doubt to the extent that I stopped recording a brand new podcast that I was so excited to start. Now, the thing about me is that I am very much a verbal processor. I'm constantly talking to my husband, my friends, and if no one's around, myself. Maybe I'm also creatively constipated this week because I was supposed to have my friend Sarah and her girls come up from Vermont to stay with us, and they had to cancel because they caught the flu. We've been friends for over 20 years, and Sarah is my go-to verbal processing buddy. We can hash and rehash stuff all day long. The added bummer is that she can't talk for coughing and needs to nap all the time, and my husband can't talk to me on the phone while he's at work, so I'm left talking to myself, which is very unsatisfying. So, because this is my podcast and I can do whatever I want, I'm going to verbally process my imposter syndrome here with you, my trusty listeners. So buckle up. Welcome to my innermost podcast-related fears. If you wish to not go on this ride, the exit is to the left. Okay, here we go. Time to drag these fears into the light of day. I took some notes, and there are a lot, but let's just examine the big ones. I'll start with the most obvious fears associated with a podcast. I'll just dive right in and let you listen while I counter-argue with myself. Why would anyone want to listen to me? To my stories? I'm not some big expert in anything. I'm not offering anything of practical value. I'm not a life coach or a motivational speaker. I just like to talk. But why should anyone like to listen? I must be some kind of arrogant person to think I have anything to say that's worth listening to. Why would someone choose to listen to me flap my gums and prattle on about things that I think are interesting but are probably very boring? Okay, so I'm going to respond to myself now. Why wouldn't anyone want to listen to me? I like to hear other people's stories. I like to hear other people's random thoughts. Maybe there are even some people out there who like to listen to stories and random thoughts too. And if I am arrogant, which I doubt, goodness knows there are plenty of people willing to listen to people even more self-important and ill-informed than I may or may not be. It hasn't stopped many a pundit, politician, or reality TV star. Why should it stop me? Some of the more popular podcasts are basically garbage. People give incel man babies platforms all the time. I am not an incel man baby. I am a reasonably nice person who deserves a platform as much as anyone else, and more than some. Maybe that should be my new tagline. Listen to Rachel Hodges. She is not an incel man baby. Okay, there's one out of the way. Here's another one. I often worry, shouldn't I be talking about important things like current events, fighting injustice, instead of fiddling around sewing doll clothes and whatever self-indulgent thing I feel like discussing? And the answer to that is no. There's nothing wrong with creating a space for myself to talk about hobbies and day-to-day stuff. And if people want to hear about important national and world events, they would be better served listening to an expert. I care, and I get my news from a variety of reliable sources, and I sign petitions and contact my congressman, but there are plenty of people with more insight than I have that you could be listening to, so I'll stay in my lane. That said, if I really feel like discussing national and world events on the podcast, I will, but it's not very likely. Here's another one. What if I embarrass myself? What if I come across as weird? Well, most of the podcast is about weird and embarrassing things that happen to me, so it has happened and it will happen again. It's all there in the title, Rachel Makes It Weird. I've already taken away the risk and replaced it with certainty. I will make it weird. I might as well embrace that very human part of myself. Maybe someone else will be a little less afraid of being embarrassed because of me, or maybe I'll just be a cautionary tale. Time will be the tell. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. I'm starting to feel like Smeagol from The Hobbit now, where he goes back and forth, arguing with his bad influence alter ego Gollum. When Gollum is saying, "You don't have any friends, nobody likes you." And Smeagol says, "Not listening, I'm not listening." I need to be like Smeagol in this scene and tell those mean voices in my head to go away and never come back. Okay, so let's tackle some more of my fears head on, shall we? Here's a biggie. What if I never get very good at running a podcast? What if I don't sound conversational enough and it sounds like I'm reading from my notes, which I usually am, because if I don't, my ADD will take over and I'll be a runaway train and no one will be able to keep up with me? What if I never develop the right tone or voice? What if I don't sound funny when I try to and do sound funny when I don't want to? What if I never hit my stride with this? And the answer to this is, as my husband says, so what? You don't have to keep doing it if you don't want to, Rachel. It's your life. You started something. You put yourself out there. You wrote a book, for goodness sakes. You know how many people talk about writing a book that never do, or if they do start, they don't finish? You know how many people talk about starting a podcast and never do it? You put yourself out there and you try new things, and I'm proud of you. Okay, everyone should have a Josh in their corner. He's so amazing. If he keeps this up, I'll have to unchain him and let him out of the basement. For real. Okay, so what if I embarrass other people? What if someone gets mad at me for sharing a story that makes them look silly or bad? Now, that's an important one. I know we all make mistakes, and I don't want to rub people's noses in them. I don't enjoy shaming or embarrassing others. My conscience still kicks me over the times my words have hurt people's feelings, going all the way back to kindergarten drama class. I was excited to be cast as Cinderella, and I was very hopeful that Nataka, a cute boy I spent many a recess chasing around the playground, would be my Prince Charming. Another boy was chosen instead, and I said that he was too fat to play the prince. The hurt look in the boy's eyes showed me I had really messed up, but I only wanted to dance with Nataka, and I refused to apologize or back down. The drama teacher solved that problem by having me perform a scene that did not involve the prince. She emptied a trash bin, it was only full of paper, onto the floor and told me to play act cleaning up after the messy stepsisters. Well, I picked up trash and cried. She chose a kind and polite little girl to play Cinderella for the ballroom scene. It was a harsh lesson, but 5-year-old me needed it. Adult me still sees that look on the little boy's face and wishes I could go back in time and say something kind instead. Okay, I got sidetracked. The point being is, even though I know I'm human and not perfect, I still feel guilty for almost every time I've hurt someone's feelings. I say almost because we all know someone who has no problems hurting other people's feelings and really just has it coming. But whether someone deserves it or not, it's not a good feeling to be embarrassed. And I want this podcast to be a fun, creative outlet. I want to build people up, not tear them down. Even if someone really deserves to be publicly called out by me, I probably won't. I feel bad about making people feel bad. That being said, as Anne Lamott wrote in her book, Bird by Bird, you own everything that happened to you. Tell your stories. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better. So that's saying something. I don't want to embarrass people. I'm going to try not to. But if I do, they probably deserved it. Okay, here's one more that's kind of related to the last one. What if putting myself out there causes people to gossip about me? I mean, whenever anyone does something new, there are people who will maybe post about your project or big accomplishment on social media, say they want you to succeed, but what they say about you when you're not around would suggest otherwise. It's really common, unfortunately. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Happens to all of us at one point or another, and it doesn't feel good. So that's been one of my fears in starting this podcast, that I might have to deal with more nonsense like that. It sucks, but I can't live my life worrying about what people like that say about me. Fortunately, I'm getting better and better at avoiding people like them. Another fear, and this is probably less reality-based than the others, is that against the odds, my weird little podcast will become wildly popular and people from my past will come out and publicly tell bad stories about me that are true. It's not super likely that I'll ever achieve a level of fame where people will care, but if that happens, there are stones to be thrown at me. I've done things that weren't very nice. I've said deeply insensitive things. It took me longer than most people to develop any kind of a working filter, so I've said a lot of things that didn't sound good at the time and didn't age well either. Even in recent years, I've impulsively said and posted things I regret. So, to answer my fear of any bad true stories coming out about me is to acknowledge that, yes, that could happen, and the only thing I can do if someone publicly, brandishes my misdeeds at me is to own up and apologize. Okay, well, hopefully that'll never happen, but I know what to do. Own up, take responsibility. Okay, another fear, and this is the biggest one, is that I'll overshare about my kids. What if I really embarrass them and they grow up to hate me and never answer my calls or come to visit? Let's unpack this. I know that's not a very reasonable fear for several reasons. First of all, one of my kids has no shame to begin with. It takes an awful lot to embarrass my son, so even if I did overshare, I'd probably get away with it. He would not care. If I threw away one piece of his string collection, he would be very upset, but I bet I could hire a skywriter to write, "Silas picks his nose." He doesn't, and he wouldn't even notice. But if there's a story about either of my kids that I suspect might leave them feeling embarrassed, I will ask for their permission to use it first. And worrying that they'll hate me one day isn't reality-based, because they don't hate me now, and they're at the age where every kid hates their parents. They're teens, so they're testing boundaries, and everything I do seems to irritate them, but they're still really affectionate. They say "I love you" far more often than they roll their eyes. Sometimes they'll still hold our hands in public, like when we go to amusement parks. That's worth the price of Disney admission alone. My daughter tells me every so often that she's glad I'm her mom and I'm doing a good job. My son, who is now about 6 feet tall, still kisses me and my husband goodnight. They really are exceptionally sweet humans. I think if I just keep doing my best and apologize when I screw up, which is often, they'll keep on loving me. Okay, one more fear. It isn't a big one for me, and it just barely makes the cut for this podcast. I'm sometimes afraid that I'll overshare about myself and will unintentionally give ammunition to internet trolls. So my answer to that is simple. Screw those people. Or at least feel sorry for them, because we're all human. We're all sensitive sometimes, and we all have days where we feel as vulnerable as a peeled grape. And it's life. There's nothing unique about it at all. Anyone who picks on someone for sharing their vulnerabilities must feel deeply insecure themselves. Maybe by being vulnerable, I can help one other person feel a little less afraid of their humanity. Maybe they'll feel just a little bit safer in their own skin and be a little bit kinder to someone else. And for those people inclined to be jerks, there's always the block button. Now that I've parsed and dissected my fears, I feel so much better. I realize that all these fears have one thing in common, which is I spend way too much time worrying about what others will think of me. I recently started reading a great book by Mel Robbins called The Let Them Theory. It's about how we need to stop caring so much about other people's opinions, and it's helping me already. Mel Robbins is my favorite podcaster, and her can-do attitude really helps lift me out of a funk. I also enjoy listening to the psychologist Dr. Ramani Deversala and Elena and Ash from Morbid. I'm looking for more podcasts to listen to while I pick up my son from school, so please let me know in the comments which ones you enjoy. I need to stop recording and do some fun and lovely housework, so I have to say goodbye for now. Please stay beautifully you and beautifully weird in all the ways that only you can. Have a great day and drop me a line with any questions or topics you'd like me to cover. Stay tuned for next time when Rachel makes it weird.